Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today I find myself on the fabled Brian's Drive-In Theater with Brian Walker. Greetings and welcome. How are you, my friend?
I'm well tonight, Hercules. How are you doing?
I'm doing as well as can be expected.
Terrific. Glad to
Many
hear
labors I'm contending with, but that's the Herculean thing to do, so no complaints.
it. I can't believe that we're already into February. It just
Yes.
seems like the holidays were just yesterday, and now we're getting close to spring. And it's Black History Month. Every February is Black History Month, and what I wanted to talk about this February tonight are blaxploitation movies. Um, Blaxploitation was a genre mostly limited to American films in the early 1970s. Much like the Peplum genre, it didn't have a very long life, but when the genre caught on, when it got really popular, the studios, especially the lower budgeted studios, cranked them out regularly.
Yes, I
And
remember.
I'm sure you went to the theater a lot during the early 70s. I did too with my parents, and saw a surprising number of blaxploitation films. And like I said earlier, right before we started recording, I didn't really know what you called them. I just thought of them as crime dramas, or depending on the movie, because blaxploitation encompasses like practically every other genre. There are comedies, there are horror films. There's a lot of fairly violent crime dramas and such. They really hold a special place in my heart because I
I,
can vividly remember seeing a number of them. Fortunately, I had very permissive parents that would take me to see fairly naughty movies as a small child. But this was at the drive-in. The theory was so well the kids go to sleep. And these movies were too much fun to sleep through, certainly.
I had a beard when I was 11, so I didn't need my parents to be permissive. I just asked to buy tickets and they would sell me the tickets.
Well, when I was 11, I looked 11. Anyway, I probably need to set blaxploitation up. And this isn't anybody else's definition. This is just one that I've cobbled together for my own. A lot of blaxploitation films, really, I think, are rooted in film noir. And I know that that's not necessarily a favorite genre of yours. But a lot of them, especially some of the earlier ones, were crime dramas, essentially. Those really, film noir kind of, mm, I guess, faded out in the late 1950s or early 1960s. And slowly but surely, those were replaced by like detective movies and crime dramas. Did you ever see Paul Newman's film Harper?
Long time ago, I don't remember it.
Okay, I kind of use it as the bridge between the late 1950s film noir and the early 1970s cop dramas that we had, like the Seven Ups, Dirty Harry, films of that nature,
Mhm.
which were usually based on some sort of organized crime rings. And you see a lot of the same tropes in the blaxploitation films that are also crime dramas. But there's a number of those really. The very first blaxploitation film is Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, which was written, produced, directed, acted in by Melvin Van Peebles. His son Mario Van Peebles is in the movie, but he's a child in the movie, and his other son is in the film as well. And as I recall, Melvin Van Peebles, since this thing was self financed, sank everything he had into production of the film, and he got about $100,000 in and had no more money. And amazingly, Bill Cosby lent him $50,000, well, and which made him a producer, but gave him enough capital to get the rest of the film made. And the film was a huge success, especially off a $150,000 budget. And it really struck a chord. It hit a nerve with audiences. And it there's nothing typical about that movie either. The protagonist, the main character, portrayed by Melvin Van Peebles, is a male prostitute, and it's just sort of he's had a really miserable life. He was born in a brothel, grew up in one, and now works in one. He works in a sex show, um, and it's just without adding in too many spoilers, it's not an uplifting film, but it is very real, very gritty, very realistic. An amazing. The first time I watched it, I just kind of blew me away. And I was an adult by the time. My parents never would have let me would have never let me have seen Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, because it is
Raunchy.
uh, well, I hate to say raunchy, um, but more than an R rating. We'll put it that way. It's kind of whoa. So if you're easily embarrassed, forget it. Otherwise, it's incredibly gritty. The portrayal just seems so realistic. It's not really like watching a film. It's almost like a documentary, and a very disturbing one. That really makes you think. And I'm sure that was his whole impetus was to get people to see um, how bad life could really be. And I don't think a lot of middle Americans, including myself, you see things like that very often, and I get that's why it is disturbing. But like I said, it really struck a chord with audiences, and it made a lot of money. So it was a big success, considering its original production. And Earth, Wind, and Fire, interestingly, did some of the music for it. And that's sort of another hallmark of blaxploitation films. No matter if the film has great production values or maybe it's a little less expensive, there always seems to be a focus on music, and some really, really good music in these early 70s films. That's my era, Well,
Mhm.
do you like funk, soul, R&B, stuff like that?
Not so much. I'm not. I like listening to music of all sorts, but I never
Mhm.
really got into, except for very briefly in grammar school for like a year. I never got into who the artists were and what the types of music they played were. It's just music.
Ah, okay. Well, for me, I really loved music as a child. I don't hear much contemporary music that I'm all that um, blown away by these days, unfortunately. I'd like to hear something new. But as a child in the early 70s, the stuff you heard on the radio, and you did hear Isaac Hayes and Curtis Mayfield. Hughes Corporation did the music for Blackula, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes. But the music was really, really integral to the film, and I think the film that really set that precedent up was Shaft, starring Richard Roundtree. Shaft debuted just a couple of months or so after Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. So it's interesting that this movement saw so many films in production. And Shaft, I actually vaguely remember seeing at the drive-in as a kid, and it was on with a probably another crime drama. I can't remember what the other movie was in the double bill, but it impressed me then, and the music was even coming out of that horrible metal speaker. The Isaac Hayes music was so good in the movie, and it's used so effectively. It is just it's perfect in terms of the way the music is used to enhance the experience
Mhm.
for the viewer. Extremely well done. It should be studied if it's not in film schools, because it is just amazingly well done. How the soundtrack, which is excellent, is so carefully woven into the production.
I was a big Superfly fan. I remember when that came out, and I had the Curtis Mayfield music that went along with that. And
You and everybody else your age. I did not, because I was still buying 45s at the time. I think I did have Freddy's Dead or something like that.
He's dead.
Which is we'll move on to Superfly. Superfly is another really gritty crime drama, and it's about a coke dealer. Ron O'Neal, a great actor who passed away sadly a number of years ago. Really effectively portrays the coke dealer, and there again, it's a disturbing movie.
Yes.
It's grim, it's gritty, it's extremely well done. It's well acted, and as good as the movie itself is, that soundtrack is just awesome. Superfly is a great song, anyway. But my favorite song of his actually is Freddie's Dead.
Yeah, Freddy's Dead is great, and it's sad. They made a
It,
sequel too, Superfly Goes to Africa or something like that.
Shaft went to Africa.
No, Superfly went to Africa too.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And
I missed that one.
the music
Or
wasn't as
Shaft did
catchy
Africa.
as Curtis Mayfield, but yeah, it was Superfly Goes to Africa.
Hmm.
So Shaft went to Africa. I guess everybody was going to Africa.
Well, a lot of people have problems with blaxploitation, and that's really what killed the genre, to tell you the truth. It only lasted about 5 or 6 years, really. And a lot of people chafed at how African Americans were being portrayed on screen. And when you go back and look at some of the plots, and when you look at um, the message that could have been read out of that, I see the point. Um, and I think it did portray. I think it did adhere to some stereotypes that the African American community were really trying to break up and debunk and disprove. So I get the glorification of violence, but on the other hand, if you think about it, all those movies back in the early 70s were like that. I mean, I can my parents again took me to see Dirty Harry. I was about 6 years old or so. And I can still kind of vividly, remember seeing the movie because it was just so hyper violent, at the time, and really, and it was violent, styled almost like a horror film, and then it would just catch you off guard, from time to time, especially the first scene in Dirty Harry with the blonde in the rooftop pool, and just really wasn't expecting that. It's a really cleverly paced movie. It keeps you on the edge of your seat the whole time. But so does Shaft, so does Superfly. So I think of those movies in that vein, but I can certainly see where civic leaders might chafe at the portrayals.
Yeah,
Um,
I can see that too. But I remember when they were first coming out at the time, it wasn't even a question of culturally, the cultural milieu it was set in and arose from. They were just great movies that you enjoyed because they were great movies and you wanted to see them again and again. We didn't have VCRs back then. We had little projectors that you can get a couple of minutes from a film and show. But I remember seeing those movies endlessly.
um, you know, we probably went to the theater, I would say at least once a week. In
Mhm.
the summers, when it was more comfortable to go to the drive-ins, although a lot of the drive-ins operated year-round or close to it. But when the summers, when it was more comfortable to go, we might even go 2 times a week. I recall I was telling Diana Montfort last week that Tuesday was dollar car night. Uh, at one particular drive-in theater when I was a kid. So guess where we went every Tuesday night.
Yeah,
But I mean, it's all really reasonably priced entertainment, and I got to see some fabulous movies. Some of the films we're talking about right now, I'm sure I saw at that drive, probably on a Tuesday night too. I didn't have a set bedtime. as a kid. I know a lot of parents, even today, will rear their children to and to expect them to go to bed at, let's say, 9 o'clock or something early. I had a set time that I was supposed to be out of bed in the morning, so
Yeah.
that made things just a little bit different. So it was okay if I stayed up until 1 o'clock at night, or 1 o'clock in the morning, that is. But I still had to be up at 6:30.
Same here. And
I think
uh,
it's a better way to do it anyway.
yes, I didn't have to
Teaches
set
teaches you
bedtime.
responsibility. I made this decision, so I have to suck it up and deal with it.
There you go.
Hmm.
I remember even when they closed the lights and wanted them to be closed out of flashlights. It's I used to read under my blanket.
I could never read in such low light now. Uh, my eyesight was great until I was about 45, and since then it's just been on this long, well-oiled skid, and
Me too.
if I'm trying to read fine print, I better have at least a set of glasses on, and I need a lot of light pumped
Mhm.
into it, because if it's even ever so slightly dim, the ink just sort of turns into blobs, and I can't read anything.
Hieroglyphics, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the same
Mhm.
way. My eyes were great until I hit like my late 40s, early 50s. Then they started
Mhm.
to slowly go, and they're still going.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, they don't get any better. They typically do continue to deteriorate. Now, when I take these off, I can see, 30 feet away just fine. As a matter of fact, I can probably read, from from there more easily. For me, it's just up close. That's the thing where I've adapted by buying a whole lot of magnifying glasses that have LED lights in them, so that you can pump a lot of light into it, and then I can actually see how many pills I'm supposed to take on the back of the bottle.
Yeah, I raid dollar stores. I buy dozens of glasses at a time. Let's see where.
Well, I usually get readers from Amazon, or sometimes when I'm on vacation in the summer, if I'm in a really cool place, they'll have some interesting readers, and I'll just, because they're like $10 a piece or something like that. So you just pick them up, and they're going to snap in two in a month anyway. So
Right.
don't get too attached to
The
it.
lens isn't there all of a sudden, and you wonder where it went or
Yeah,
how it went. And
I got something like 10 of these, which kind of have a tortoise shell. They don't look bad. I got 10 of them for something like $20 on Amazon.
well,
And I thought, well, great, these will last me forever for the rest of my life. And one by one, snap, snap, snap. I, I went through 8 of them in probably like 3 or 4 months. The last 2 sets have been fine. I've been wearing these for like a couple of years.
yeah, I
So
lose mine. So every now and then they'll discover a cache of glasses. There's a lot of them there. Then they'll disappear, and I wonder where they go because I pretty much stay in a enclosed area, and the ones for when I go outside I have in my bag, so they stay kind of like in my bag. But
I have had people, well, I no longer have an office on campus, but I've had people pilfer mine.
really,
Yes. So I always, at work, after a while, I always had to have a backup there, because otherwise I couldn't find my keys. Couldn't read texts on my cell phone.
yeah, my neuropathy makes it hard with cell phones pressing the buttons. I don't understand how anybody can text with my I have thick fingers to begin with, so my
Mm.
dexterity is not that great. And then with the neuropathy, it's even more difficult to press the tiny little buttons. And
Well, I don't have I have a friend. Well, he's a big guy. He's like 6'8". So his hand is, I mean, like NBA quality.
uh-huh.
Uh, but he has this giant phone. I think it's a Samsung. It's like an iPad. I mean, it's huge. it, it even looks big in his hand. My hands aren't as big as his, so I use an iPhone SE, which is sort of the budget price iPhone because I'm hard on phones. And texting on it, I can't. It's not big enough for me to do two-handed. I can only just peck, 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 peck. I can't use my thumbs with it because I don't even think my fingers are that fat or anything, but the screen is just not big enough for these
Right.
fingers to do it. So yeah, it's but getting back into blaxploitation films. Michael Waterman wanted me
Mhm.
to talk about a couple of films that I really think we should address anyway.
Awesome.
At least one of which I saw at again the drive-in theater, and it's a sentimental favorite of mine too. It's Blackula.
I love
Uh,
that movie.
it, everybody does. I've never had one person say to me, "Oh God, I hate that." It seems to be practically everyone's favorite blaxploitation film, and I like to think that it maybe had something to do with William Marshall's performance in it. He was a Shakespearean, classically trained actor, very well known, on stage, and it was kind of odd to see him when he did start to branch out into television and film. Um, in the 60s and 70s, it's kind of odd to see him in this role, but he's the one that sells it. He takes what could be, you know, almost broad comedy and makes it really serious. It does a really good
Mhm.
performance with it, and it's really his performance, I think, that elevates the film. He's really good in it, and
Yes.
he's creepy. I mean, he's got, when he's, in vampire mode, he's pretty scary. It looks good, and he's got the right attitude for it in the film too.
Yes, he looks imperious, and he has a commanding presence, and the classical training certainly helped in how he took the role and made it his and made it very distinct. But I agree.
Yeah, most definitely. And I'd be neglectful not to mention a couple of my favorite favorite 70s actresses. Denise Nicholas is in it, and she pops up in several blaxploitation titles. And another favorite of mine was the beautiful Vonetta McGee. Um, she was just stunning, beautiful actress, and sadly passed away kind of young,
Hmm.
um, a number of years ago, probably 13, 14 years ago. But big couple of big favorites of mine are in it, and William Marshall went on to be the king of cartoons on Pee Wee's Playhouse in the late 1980s, which I loved watching. I think I was in grad school when that was on, and every Saturday morning. I liked to tune in, and it was just I had I'd seen Blackula a number of times by then. Probably even had a copy of on VHS by the time he was on Pee Wee's Playhouse, and I was like, "Oh my God, it's Blackula! why is he on this children's show?"
Why not?
Well, yeah, why not? Now, on the flip side, there is another blaxploitation horror film that it does not have nearly as many fans as Blackula, and that's Blackenstein.
Yes, yes, yes.
And I have a fresh viewing in my head of Blackenstein. Watched it this afternoon. We actually had a copy of it. I didn't think we did. We have a terrible copy of it. It's from a VHS copy of a VHS. So the color's kind of blown out. It's kind of dark, kind of a little hard to see, but a fun movie on its own. Not produced anywhere near as well as Blackula. Blackula was done by American International, and by the early 70s, although American International made some inexpensive films, they would throw some money behind something that they thought would bring big returns. Yeah, they would actually fund it and make sure that it was shot professionally and it looked good.
Blackenstein was hard to find, I remember. I had a
It,
copy in VHS years ago. Blackula you could find, but
yeah,
Blackenstein, a lot of people considered it apocryphal, that it was like a fantasy or an urban legend because you couldn't find it anywhere.
I don't know that you can find it now, quite honestly. I got to tell you, Greg over the years has made copies of everything. So I probably shouldn't say that. But to tell you the truth, whenever I do need to watch, several films to prepare for, one of our podcasts, oftentimes I'm going into the video closet and pulling out one that he burned himself because I don't have access to it, any other way.
Hmm.
So and if you can't watch it, it's hard to talk about it. You know what I mean?
Yes, I know exactly what you mean.
So I watched Blackenstein, and our copy is terrible, but it's complete. And I had seen it before, but it's been a long. It was the last time I really watched that movie. It was on VHS. I'm probably pretty sure. Um, but John Hart is Dr. Stein in it, so he's Dr. Frankenstein essentially. And John Hart's probably best known for being the Lone Ranger in the early 1950s TV show when Clayton Moore walked away from the show in a salary dispute. So he took over the role for probably the better part of a year, I would say. Later on in his career, John Hart did a lot of episodic television in the 50s and 60s, worked a lot. Never became a big star or anything like that, but he was good, reliable actor. Showed up, did his lines. Uh, had a good looking guy when he was younger. Weren't we all?
Very true.
Anyway, he's the star. There's only really a couple of other people in this movie who have ever been in a movie before. Andrea King, who's a great B actress from the 1940s. She did some Sherlock Holmes. She did a couple of Sherlock Holmes movies, or at least one, that is, The Woman in Green, with Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce. And she's great in it too. Her film noir was really her. That was her genre. I mean, she's really good at kind of the mysterious, smoky blonde.
Hmm.
Um, Not beautiful, but handsome and well coiffed. Really pulled together. Very stylish, very fashionable. Um, and that was kind of her upper crust, vaguely European woman who was actually from New York. Well, but it was a type. It was her type. That's what she was really
Uh-huh.
looking. And yeah, she's credited in this, and gosh, they don't give her lines or anything. It's like, why did you do to this? Why did you do to this woman? Why did you do this? She could have done something else much better in this film than just sitting there being one of Dr. Stein's patients. She didn't have any lines. It was just that my heart broke for her because they really should have used her. She was a great actress. Why would you reduce her to just essentially bit part? She's not even old here.
A movie came out recently called Madam Web. It's not doing so good in the reviews, but
I've heard.
that was a criticism that was leveled against it. They had all these top-notch actors, who were recognizable and who were very talented, but they
Mhm.
don't give them anything really worth saying or doing. So they had like all this talent and they wasted it. That's a critique that's popped up numerous times in the reviews.
And that's unforgivable. If that is true. Now I haven't seen it, so I can't. Although I've seen it happen in other films. And that's really unforgivable. If you have somebody, well, like Andrea King at Blackenstein. Now, admittedly, maybe she saw the script and said, "Can you make me mute?" So I didn't give her credit for that. Maybe that was her idea, and not the original idea of the script. So that could be. Um, anyway, the other primary actors in Blackenstein. Joe Dessous is the monster, and as far as I know, it was his only film. He appears to be very tall, and I guess that's why he was cast in the role. Um, the female lead in it, and I'm sorry, I cannot remember the actress's name. I think it was her only film too. Another interesting actress of note is in this film just in one scene, and that's Liz Renee. Liz Renee is in one scene in this movie. She had a, if you look at her filmography, it is bizarre. Um, she's in one of John Waters' films called Desperate Living, which, if you haven't
I
seen
love
it,
that.
the movie is, to tell you the truth, except for the fact that Divine's not in it, it probably is my favorite John Waters movie because it is so bizarre and absurd. And everybody in it just seems to be on the same page, and everybody sort of gives it 1,000%, and just batshit crazy absurd. I love the whole dystopia that, but it's done as almost a fairy tale. So it's this dystopian fairy tale is probably the best way to put it. And Liz Renee's a lesbian in it, and she lives with this very butch lesbian, and they're lovers. And it's just, I don't want to give away the plot too much. But Desperate Living is fabulous. If you're a John Waters fan, you've already seen it. And if you tend to get queasy in movies, if Pink Flamingos bothered you, yeah, go ahead and skip Desperate Living. But otherwise, take a shot at it. It's a
Yeah, I'm
great
a huge
movie.
Waters fan, and I used to have everything on VHS years and years and years ago.
Well,
So
Liz, going back to Liz Renee, she was a stripper. Uh, she was also a gun moll for a mobster for a while. Got sent up. She had to do some time because she wouldn't talk to the jury. But she stayed alive. So, yeah. So I think Liz knew what she was doing. Um, and she was actually in the 70s. I think she and her daughter had a sort of a mother-daughter stripper act.
hmm.
Well, Liz Taylor, or Liz Taylor, listen to me. Liz Renee, I think legitimately a time or two in her career, if the planets had been correctly aligned, and if she hadn't been dealt a bad hand, she might have actually been somebody. I mean, but by saying that, I mean uh, popular in some form of media, whether it was TV or film or what have you. I think she could have had more of a career than she certainly did, and gorgeous. Even into old age, she was still a very attractive woman.
More wasted potential.
Yeah, that's a shame, but like I said, I don't think it was her. I think it was the hand she was dealt. Well, I should say that it's also involved a lot of bad choices that she made. But it's not, yeah, her misfortune didn't just float down from the sky. You make your choices, I guess, in life.
And
Some of us, I tend to make very safe choices, only because I don't want to turn into Liz Renee and get sent to Rikers Island.
so no gun mauling or gun anything in your cards.
True. Thank you. Anyway, going back to Blackenstein, first half of the movie's kind of slow. Uh, it's one of the lesser budgeted blaxploitation films, even on my horrible copy. You can tell that this was like bare bones, production. They didn't spend a whole lot of money on it. I can't find out. I wasn't able to find out that is how much they spent on it, because I don't think the original production company wanted anybody to find out that they only spent about $18,000 or something on it. Because it's very inexpensive. Um, that's not to say that it's not. And I thoroughly enjoyed it watching it this afternoon. I found it very entertaining. So there's that. It gets terrible reviews in IMDb, but don't listen to those people. Half those people haven't watched the movie. They just want to comment on it anyway. If you can find a copy of it, watch it because it is fun. And there are some really effective horror elements in it. Uh, it's not all a camp fest. I mean, there is some camp, obviously, But there are some pretty gruesome things that happen. And the ending is kind of shocking too. It's kind of gruesome actually, but it's fun to watch.
Yes, it is. And
And hard to watch because I think that our copy, the one that we have, is so crappy because I don't think, as I recall, I don't think you could get a decent copy of it. I'll have to check that out though.
yeah, it's been years, but I remember how difficult it was to look at a copy and how frustratingly long
Hmm.
a time it took to have the copy in hand. And I believe that there were problems with the copy that I eventually acquired, and
Ooh,
it's long since been destroyed in a flood, most likely.
oh,
A lot of my films got destroyed in the flood.
Hercules, that flood kind of ruined your life.
I didn't ruin
I
my
mean,
life, but it got rid of a lot of, in addition to my films, it got rid of all the tapes from my TV show. I kept them, even though they probably won't play anymore. Till they
yeah.
get old, I'll hold on to them. And my
Mhm.
Conan collection got like maybe a fourth of it got ravaged by the waters and was underwater. So those have accompanied me since I was 11. Um,
Oh,
but what can you do? That is life, and we can't take any of it with us anyways. So
that is a great way to look at that. It's very positive. I like that. Very positive outlook. I'm not sure I would be so positive. I think that would still be chapping my ass, but I like your attitude. It's very good. I'll have to. I need to be now that I'm retired, a retired old man. I need to be a little more serene than I typically. Well, no, I am. I'm a pretty low key guy. At least I think I am. Who knows?
I think you are too. You know, we've never met personally, but we've been interacting for years, and I like to consider you a friend, a close friend. Uh,
I consider you one as well.
and I would say that in on the scale of all the people I know, you're pretty serene.
Well, I've made very safe choices, unlike Liz Renee. So, but and I think I've been dealt a decent hand too. I did, misfortune can always, just drop down from the sky. But I think I have led a decent life. Very lucky with charmed, might be a better way to put it.
As I get older, I play it safer. But I remember the words of my father when he was dying. He said in Greek, but in English, it's like, um, I've lived a safe life, and look where it got me. You know, he was in the nursing facility on a bed. You know,
Well, there is something to say for taking a chance too, because if nothing really grand is going to happen to you unless you make it happen, and you have to take a chance. So that's a good point. I can see that. They say that when you are in your final stage and you're getting ready to pass yourself away, that typically people regret not the things that they've done, but the things that they should have done when they were able to.
yes, I,
And
I learned that working in the health profession. I work with people who weren't leaving their beds. You know, they were in a hospital unit or in some sort of hospice or other type of program, so they weren't going anywhere. That was the last place that they were going to be. And if they were lucid, I discovered that the biggest gift you can have at that point in life is good memories. And the worst thing, the worst curse is having regrets. And it wasn't big things. Nobody ever listed their job or anything like that.
uh,
But people would say that they wish they told somebody how they felt, and they didn't because they were afraid, or they wish they'd gone on a trip that they were invited to, but they were afraid, or they wish they had done something that they could have done, but they were concerned with what people would say. And that stage in life, those things eat you. And I would see how much that regret would hurt. So I resolved, not that I'm living a wise life or anything, but I resolved that until I die and until I'm no longer lucid, I would try to say and do the things that I want to say and do, and to have as few regrets as possible.
and there again, I think that's a really positive outlook on life. I I hope I don't have any regrets like that. I don't think I will. A really good friend of mine died right before the pandemic started in December of 2019. I'd known him for years, you know. His passing away really tore me up because he was the one friend that I would go to for
Mhm.
kind of fatherly advice. If that, I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but it was a
Yes, it does.
particular kind of advice. He was very pedantic, I will say that. So he would give you his opinion 20 times
Make
in
sure
the
you get it
same
right.
speech. I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but if you don't do this, you're going to fuck it up. Essentially, that was always his Chuck's uh, his outlook, pretty much. But after that, I was obviously I was very sad. I lost a friend and somebody I talked to almost all the time. You know, but I was also got floundering because I thought, well, I don't have anybody to, who do I go to for advice? And I still don't have anybody. It's awful. you
But
know,
still, when you talk about what you're doing and what you're planning on doing and what you'd like to do, you seem to be considering your options and you seem to be taking action. And the very fact that you have options, is a good thing.
oh, definitely. Yeah,
So,
I agree.
so I think you've internalized your friend and he gives you advice, hopefully not 20 times, but you seem to be full of that type of wisdom. And you work with kids and help them through a certain period in their lifetime, so you guide them. So you're the wise person now.
Well, or a facsimile thereof, I suppose. Yeah. No, one of the things that I was lucky enough to talk to him on his deathbed. I was actually able to say goodbye. And
That's good.
that's a luxury too. I got to tell you,
Yes.
that hardly ever happens. And several things that he said to me, and gosh, this is going to be 5 years ago, before too long, are still kind of ringing in my ears, and it's one of the reasons I retired early. Um, was that essentially all of this other stuff is crap. Go out and as soon as you can do it, go out and do what you want to do.
Right.
And something that I wouldn't have considered doing 5 years ago, and here I am, happily retired. Um, I never dreamed that I'd be at this stage because I don't. I mean, I'm old, but I don't think of myself as being retiree old.
Hmm.
But I am, I guess. You know, and I haven't done a damn thing in the last 2 months, and I really enjoyed myself. I've gotten to watch some great cinema. Got to watch Blackenstein today. I wouldn't have if I'd been at work. I wouldn't have been able to do that. Right,
Right.
right. And like I said, thoroughly enjoyed myself. Another movie that I haven't seen for a while, but I'm going to have to pull it out of the vault here, is The Thing with Two Heads.
Yes.
Notorious, but I don't think it's as bad of a film as it often gets accused of being. Because let's face it, it is a parody. It's not supposed to be a good movie. It's supposed to be sort of a comedy, horror, sci-fi, all in the family sort of thing. It is played for laughs, and I think it's a riot. I first saw it when I was a kid. Um,
Me too. I remember I remember sitting in the theater. You took me way back there, and I'm sitting in the theater, the RKO Coliseum. I was sitting on the left side aisles, and I could see myself watching. I forget what his name is, the stocky
Rose,
actor.
Rosie Greer
Rosie Greer, yes. Kind of going down the hill, in a bumpy kind of way. That was hilarious.
with Ray Milland on his neck.
Yes.
I like Ray Milland. Ray Milland was a great actor. Um, he you did some wonderful Lost Weekend. I think it's a fantastic movie, and it's about um, his character's alcoholism. Very, very well played. Mid 40s, depressing movie as you might imagine, but very well done. And through no fault of his, he found himself out of contract in the late 50s, like a lot of other people. And obviously, he wanted to work, and he did. I'm not sure Ray said no after a while, but he's in some fantastic movies later on in his career. I can name more of his late movies than I can his early movies. He's in a favorite of mine called Frogs.
I just
Early,
found a copy of Frogs. I
okay,
got it for $1 in the thrift store.
and he's the the patriarch in it with the southern accent. I'm like, oh, Ray, don't attempt the accent. Just go with Ray Milland. He's kind of nasty and dastardly. He plays that character really well, in these later films. And Ray Milland is the bad guy. He's the antagonist in The Thing with Two Heads. He's this racist old white man who wants to have. He's dying, and he wants to have his head transplanted onto a healthy body, a much younger body. You know, and he's supposed to be, I think, about 70 years old here or something like that. Well, probably close to what he was. And something happens that the last minute they put him on Rosie Greer's shoulder instead. You have to mount the new head over here, so it eventually becomes stronger, and then it can take place of the old head becomes weaker and weaker, and then it can be that's the science behind The Thing with Two Heads, as I recall. I know a disturbing amount about this movie now, and I haven't watched it for a while. I wanted to, but I ran out of time. I know it sounds cheesy as hell because it is, but but there again, and you've seen it, so you know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. If you have not seen it, seek it out. I think it's available on Prime, or it used to be anyway. And if you're a completist like I am, you have some form of DVD of The Thing with Two Heads. Lots of fun to watch, and it actually has a pretty good supporting cast too. Chelsea Brown from Laugh-In
Hmm.
was in the cast. Roger Perry, a character actor from, golly, the 50s and 60s, it was in it. Was once married to Joanne Worley, and I think when he died, he was married to Joyce Bulifant. So he, he married other funny people, and he did a lot of comedy stuff. And it's a comedy film masquerading itself as a horror film. There are no horror elements in it at all. And like you said about the one scene with Rosie Greer, he's Ray Milland is clearly just sort of leaning in
Yes.
on his shoulder, and it looks so uncomfortable. And they've got their heads kind of locked together in
A
this
harness of some sort.
in
Yeah.
this some sort of styrofoamy looking kind of thing. That could not have been comfortable. And Rosie Greer, I think, is a real trooper for having to wear a Ray Milland for probably a week or two. Yeah, that had to have been uncomfortable. And they must have gotten along though. I've never heard anything. I've never heard of Ray Milland being this horrible racist or anything like that. Who would know now? I mean, but they just to be in that proximity with somebody that would really, that would get on my nerves after a while.
Uh,
I'm afraid I don't like any kind of restraint other than just like a seatbelt. I can handle that, but any other restraints I really don't like. And having to wear an old guy on
on
your
your
shoulder.
shoulder.
Oh, even as a football player, Rosie's a big guy, but
Hmm.
even as a football player, speaking of which, speaking of Rosie Greer, he has a cousin who is very famous
Yes. Pam.
in films. Gorgeous Pam Grier. Pam Grier was the protagonist of a number of blaxploitation films. Very strong black woman, as they are known today. But back then, Pam Grier was going into bad situations and making them right. No matter how corrupt or criminal it was, And when she was done, all the bad guys were dead. So
She did it with style too.
she sure did. And did it so that she couldn't be traced back to it and charged with murdering like 50 people. But it's vigilanteism, and you
Right.
saw it a lot. You saw it a lot in '70s films, like Charles Bronson did Death Wish,
Mhm.
and Pam Grier's best films, I think, or certainly her most well, no, her best films, I think, are Coffee, which is another American international film, very popular, from 1973. Um, and in Coffee, she's a nurse by day and is correcting society's ills by by night, essentially. Um, and it was a big hit with audiences. And Pam Grier, who had been making films for several years before that, and had been some interesting stuff too. Um, there's a mind blowing scene in Coffee. I'll try to dance around it without giving it away, but she's trying to figure out sort of who the kingpin is in the dope ring, essentially. And she meets up with this, well, pimp, and eventually blows his head off. I mean, graphically. I mean, and for the early '70s,
They were very graphic back then. Yes.
and not only that, they spent AIP spent enough on the effect so that it looked kind of believable. It could have been that way, and just kind of blew my little mind. The first time I saw it, I was like, "Oh my god!" And from there, I was hooked on Pam Grier. I got to tell you, I love the tough, no nonsense. I see a problem, and by God, I'm going to stand up and go in and fix it myself because nobody else is.
And the
And
dramatic
I
passion.
like the message. I think it's not only is it's not just a positive message for young women who would have been seeing the film at the time. I think it's a positive message for everybody, really.
I
Uh,
agree.
and like I said, wildly popular film. Did extremely well at the box office, and it took Pam Grier, kind of made her an overnight celebrity, although she'd been working, before. It wasn't as though she hadn't been doing anything. She'd been in films for several years by the time Coffee came around.
Well,
And
the message that comes across in a lot of films from that time and afterwards, and they were it's the same message in samurai films and barbarian movies, is that the individual, one individual, is stronger than all human institutions. And as
yeah,
long as that individual is focused on a goal, nothing will deter them from that goal. And that repeats itself in a lot of entertainment. And it's an ancient message too. You have the heroes of ancient Greece and Rome. You have a lot of stories throughout the globe where the person is stronger than the society.
mhm. And this a lot of the films that she did in the '70s, you know, she's she's stepping out of what the typical female role had been at the time,
Hmm.
and fixing things that she sees that aren't right. And I think it's a great message. It's a shame that she didn't get to make a lot more of these. She did another one that originally was conceived as a sequel, and it's called Foxy Brown.
Yes.
Willie Hutch did the music for Foxy Brown, and Foxy Brown's got a really good cast too. Antonio Fargas is in it, who has, gosh, he's been acting for 50, 60 years. I think he's still active uh, as an actor. Peter Brown from The Rifleman, no, sorry, that's wrong. The Lawman with John Russell and Peter Brown. Terry Carter is in it. Terry Carter, great character actor, who did a lot of films, a lot of exploitation. Well, black exploitation films. Sid Haig is in Foxy Brown as well, and Sid Haig and Pam Grier, their paths crossed a lot earlier in their careers. And in the late 90s, when Tarantino put Jackie Brown together, he made sure to bring Sid Haig in, as a minor character, just just so they could see each other.
Mhm.
I'm a big Sid Haig fan as well.
Yes.
There's a lot to talk about with blaxploitation, though. One of my favorite Bond films, although I think it seems very cheesy today, is Live and Let Die. It was the first Roger Moore
Mhm.
Bond film, and it's essentially a blaxploitation movie, essentially, with a Caucasian protagonist. But they just lift, a lot of blaxploitation out and then slam it right into this Bond movie. And they do it well. I mean, they've got the tropes together. They've got the talent behind. I saw. I actually saw. I think we didn't see the drive-in. I think we actually saw that at the theater. Um, but as short-lived as the genre was, they cranked out a lot of movies. Cleopatra Jones is another fun one, and it's another female vigilante. Is well, she's Cleopatra Jones is more legitimate than a vigilante. I she's not quite like Pam Grier's character in Coffee or Foxy Brown. She has the qualifications, I should say, the government qualifications to back them up. Um,
So she's a superhero of some sorts.
oh well, getting close to it, and almost as tall as one. Tamara Dobson was a fashion model and a stylist who got into films in the early 70s. And she was cast as Cleopatra Jones, a statuesque, beautiful actress, reportedly about 6'2". Very lean. So, as some of my female friends would say, she could wear anything because she was sort of the perfect, physical type to be able to essentially wear anything, I suppose. And Shelley Winters is
Mhm.
the antagonist in Cleopatra Jones, and that's one of the things that makes that dynamic is having, female protagonists, female antagonists. That's one thing that really sets Cleopatra Jones apart, and it's really fun to take a look at it. The supporting cast is great. Bernie Casey is in it, famous African American character actor. Um, a lot of fun to watch. They did a sequel called Cleopatra Jones and the Casino of Gold, and that was a couple of years later, and it's primarily shot in around Hong Kong, I think. And Stella Stevens is the antagonist in it, and it's fun. A lot of action in both of these films. I think in the sequel, Casino of Gold, I think that is actually has more action in it than the first one does. They're fun films to watch if you're into watching an action film and you want to see a really strong female protagonist.
You think they'll bring, there was for a while like a resurgence of those type of films. Do you
Mhm.
think there'll be another resurgence of those type of films?
I think we're still seeing it. These films, I think, were problematic for a lot of leaders in the 1970s because they didn't like some of the messages that they saw. You can always disagree on what a message is,
Right.
you know. But a lot of leaders didn't like what they saw in some of these films and how they saw people being portrayed, and I can see it from that angle. Okay, I see where they're going with it, even though I didn't really read it that way. But I could see where that might be the case with some people. On the other hand, these movies are now classics. They're 50 plus years old for the most part. It's representation, you know, and perhaps some of it is not so much welcomed representation, but it is representation. Before that, there was black cinema. Um, it's just that not that many people got to see black cinema. You only got to see it in certain neighborhoods in certain cities. You didn't get to see those kinds of films typically in more rural settings. Um, and these films were mainstream. They were meant to be mainstream
General
popular,
audiences, yeah.
right? And films that were made for everybody to come to see. Now, yeah, I think initially they did want to cater to the African American community, uh, but everybody went to see them. I mean, like I said, I've got like 4 pages of notes here. I think I saw about 90% of these as a kid, believe it or not.
I believe it because I've seen the same movies.
There's a couple that I didn't see as a child. One's a horror film. It's an exorcism film called Abby, with Carol Speed.
I saw,
Uh, William Marshall and Terry Carter are in this one too. Juanita Moore, from Imitation of Life, a great black character actress, are on Abby. My copy of Abby is really not very good. I wish I had a better copy of it because the copy itself, it's not all that watchable.
but you have a copy, and
I
that's
do,
interesting. Yeah, I think
but
the same way. If I can't find a copy in the quality I want, if I find any copy to hold its place, and then I'll progressively look for better ones until I find the copy that I want.
and before the black exploitation genre, I don't want to say it shut down, but it sort of morphed. It did progress. I think after a while, there was certainly more inclusion in late '70s movies than there was in late '60s movies. Certainly, is the TV movie and the TV show Get Christy Love,
Yes.
which I remember seeing as a kid in the '70s. I have a copy of the TV movie, which again is unfortunately not very great. I believe it is public domain, not the TV series, just
Movie.
uh, the TV film. A lot of TV films, for whatever reason, in the 1970s, weren't slapped a copyright on it. Odd, very odd. And even the ones that were, lapsed into public domain, after 27 years. Nobody thought, well, nobody's ever going to want to see this again. So,
Yeah, that's the logic that led to a lot of old television shows being erased to record something
no,
else on the tapes.
doesn't that break your heart? There's so much entertainment
Uh,
out there that I've read about over the years. A lot of Dumont television programming from the early '50s. I would love to see. I know I watch a lot of old movies, but I also watch a lot of old television from the early days of TV, and it's kinescope. The only way that you could record a TV broadcast until essentially like 1956, 1957, was to aim a 16 millimeter camera at a television.
wow.
It was the only way that you could do it. And for series, for television shows that were to be sent to other markets, or run at different times, they had to have a kinescope. They had to run it off of a 16 millimeter projector, in order to broadcast it. And
Unfortunately, we're running out of time.
ah,
And I think that this subject deserves a part two at least.
oh, definitely, golly, I mean, we just scratched the surface.
We'll keep
I've
scratching at
got
that
2 more
surface.
pages of notes, Hercules.
Let's go below the surface and let's keep going.
I know we didn't get to talk about Fred Williamson or anything. Gosh,
We will.
or Rudy Ray Moore. We didn't get to talk about him. I mean, yeah. Why don't we just, yeah, we'll just do this for May as well, because
Okay.
this is a rich field here.
And you and I must have a conversation because I'm revamping things a little bit, and I'm
Okay,
gonna be doing more specials. So we could even pick a topic and do a special, whenever we could schedule one.
sounds good.
Thank you very much. How can people find you and appreciate your work?
Well, just point your browser at briansdriveintheater.com. Brian with an I. The site is updated every day, so it may look a little old, but I assure you I'm in it every day. I update birthdays every day, and we also have a movie of the day each day at Brian's Drive-In Theater. You can stop by briansdrivetheater.com to see the movie of the day, always a public domain film from days gone by. Or if you want to interact with me on social media, find me on Facebook. You can run a search for Brian's Drive-In Theater or Brian Walker, and I should pop up.
Thank you so very much. Say hi to Greg, and I
I'll
look
do that.
forward to our next conversation on Sunday.
Okay, take care, Hercules.
You too. Be well, my friend. And now the arrow doesn't want to move.